The stagecoach wheels creaked to a stop, kicking up a hot breath of Texas dust. No one got out at first. The townsfolk waited. A few men leaned off the porch rail of the saloon, squinting. When she finally stepped down, there was no mistaking her. She wore black, not morning black, not Sunday church black, coffin black. Wide-brimmed hat, veil down, dress buttoned to the throat like she was about to bury someone or already had. Sheriff Eli Granger approached like he was walking to collect a debt, not a bride. He didn't speak, just took her arm and led her down the main street. She didn't look at him, didn't look at anyone. One hand held a small leather case. The other stayed still at her side. The preacher, old Father Keene, stood by the chapel gate. He nodded toward the couple, then paused, brow furrowed as the bride passed. She didn't return the look. Something in her stillness made him shift his weight, like he'd just remembered a funeral with no prayer. Inside the general store, Miss O'Hara whispered, "That girl ain't said a word. Not one." "Maybe she can't," said Mr. Doyle, folding cans into a crate. "Maybe she's hiding something," she replied. "Maybe she's just smart," Doyle muttered. Mouths where trouble starts. At the saloon, 3 drunk cowhands watched her walk by. One spat tobacco into the dirt. Sheriff got himself a pretty one. Quiet, too. "Hell, she's perfect." Another laughed. $10 says she don't. Make it a week. 20 says she talks before sundown. "Nope," said the third, leaning back in his chair. 5 says she don't ever talk at all. They chuckled and let it be. Back at the sheriff's house, she took her suitcase inside and unpacked with methodical quiet. She set a small, wood-framed photo on the windowsill, 2 figures, hard to see in the fading light. One wore a preacher's collar. Eli poured himself whiskey at the table and stared. "You plan on making supper, or you just here to stand there?" She nodded once. No words. She made stew, salted biscuits, set 1 plate down, 1 spoon, 1 folded cloth. He watched her eat with deliberate slowness, as if she were counting chews. That night, she knelt by the bed and whispered something inaudible. Just air and breath. Next morning, she swept the porch. She washed Eli's shirts, hung them neatly on the line, fed the hound dog. Still nothing from her lips. By Friday, the saloon had made it a game. Silent Sal, they called her. A chalkboard hung by the piano. First word wager, place your bets. The sheriff didn't stop it. In fact, he seemed to enjoy it. Sunday church, she sat in the back. When the hymn books passed down, she didn't open hers, just stared at the steeple. Father Keene's sermon stuttered when his eyes met hers. Something about grace dying in the mouths of liars. Afterward, she placed a single button on the offering plate. Outside, the sheriff grunted. "You coulda at least sang. Might make 'em think you ain't a ghost." She looked at him, straight in the eyes. Nothing but wind moved between them. That night, Eli pinned a weathered photograph to his office wall. Him and 5 other men in tattered Confederate coats, dirty, proud, squinting against sun and smoke. He stared at it long, poured another drink, went to bed. Next morning, the photo was gone. "Did you move that?" he asked her. She blinked, shook her head. "You think this is funny?" She placed a cup of coffee in front of him, then walked away. He found the photo under his pillow 3 days later, folded in half. His own face creased. On Thursday, the hound barked into the night. She was gone. Door swung open. Eli grabbed his rifle and lantern. Found her an hour later, kneeling at the edge of town, hands in the dirt. Praying? At this hour. She stood, wiped her hands, walked back without a word. The next morning, the school children found a shape scratched in the earth by the water. Well, a cross pierced by a bullet. That evening, Miss O'Hara said she saw the bride digging behind the old stable. Grave digging? No. Careful digging. like she was trying to find something. That weekend, 2 cowboys digging anew. Fence line hit bone, then cloth, then a rusted belt buckle engraved with a Union eagle. The sheriff rode out and confirmed it was some old deserter, probably froze and buried by his own. But the preacher looked pale. He recognized the worn Bible in the dead man's grip. He'd seen it once, in Georgia. Before the war ended, in the hands of a traveling black preacher, whispers spread like summer snakes. That woman came from Georgia, didn't she? I heard her daddy was a minister. I heard she watched him hang. Eli caught her standing in the parlor, staring at the spot where the Confederate photo had been. You think I don't know what this is? You digging around, messing with my head? She turned slowly, then opened her hand. Inside was a page, burned on the edges. His handwriting. Where'd you get that? She laid it on the table. July 2nd, 1864. Marched through Elms Hollow. Found 1 preacher, 1 Bible. Burned 'em both. Buried the man. Took the page. He stepped back like he'd seen a ghost. You been reading my past, huh? Think you know what war makes of a man? She didn't blink, just walked away. That night, he nailed shut the old war chest. Drank until the bottle shattered on the floor. Slept with his revolver on the nightstand. She sewed by candlelight. Silent. The townsfolk stopped laughing, stopped betting. Even the bartender took down the chalkboard. She swept the chapel steps the next morning. The preacher nodded, then bowed, his head. The boy who once watched her pray knelt beside her and asked, "Miss, were you ever scared?" She looked at him a long time, then raised her hand and touched her heart, then her lips, then the sky. The boy didn't understand, but he smiled anyway. That night, thunder rolled across the plains, and Eli Granger sat in his office reading a page he thought he'd burned 10 years ago. Behind him, her footsteps echoed down the hall. Slow, measured. She didn't carry a lamp, but her shadow stretched longer than any man's. The sky over Dry Creek split open the day they found the body. 2 ranch hands digging post holes for the new corral hit something that wasn't stone and wasn't root. 1 whack too many, and the dirt coughed up a rib. An hour later, the preacher stood over a shallow grave holding a water-warped Bible with pages stuck together like old leaves. Inside was a cloth scrap marked with a broken gold cross. The law called it old remains, no foul play, and rode off like they'd seen nothing. But the bride showed up the next morning, silent, hands folded, standing at the edge of the burial like it was her own father in that ground. Some said nothing. Some crossed themselves. The boy from the church tugged his mother's dress and asked if angels sometimes wore black. Back at the sheriff's house, Eli found the war photo missing again. The one he'd hammered into the wall himself. He found the nail still there, but the picture was folded and left in the pocket of his coat. Folded perfectly, like someone had handled it with reverence, not malice. His hand shook when he put it back. That night he sat up cleaning his gun. He cleaned it too long, didn't notice her watching from the doorway. She said nothing. He looked up once, caught her gaze, and something in it knocked the whiskey right out of his hand. It hit the floor and spilled across the floorboards like blood. "You've been poking in things that don't concern you," he said. She didn't nod, didn't flinch, just turned and walked back down the hallway, dress whispering across the wood. She didn't sleep that night, or if she did, it was with eyes open. 2 days later, someone placed a torn Confederate battle flag on the church door. Not hung, just left, mud-smeared, frayed, and smelling of river rot. The preacher found it, took it in without a word. That Sunday, his sermon had no fire and no shouting, just a line delivered flat. The Lord don't forget what men try to bury, especially not under his steeple. She sat in the back, head bowed. After service, Eli dragged her behind the chapel by the wrist. Not rough, not loud, but tight enough to leave a mark. "You did that?" he hissed. Her expression didn't change. He waited. "Say something." Her eyes dropped to his boots, dirt on the heels. The kind of red clay that didn't come from town. He followed her gaze. "Let go." The next morning, she laid out a page at breakfast. Not hers, his. From the journal he kept during the war, at least what remained of it. Most had burned in a fire, years back. Only a few sheets survived. This one shouldn't have. July 3rd, 1864. He remembered the handwriting, remembered the day, remembered burying that man under a hickory tree while the rest of the unit laughed and lit cigars with the man's hymn book, preacher of some kind, black. Carried himself like he had God behind him, wouldn't kneel even with a bayonet at his chest. So Eli made him. The bride slid the page across the table. His hand didn't reach for it. "What do you want?" he asked. She blinked. "Once, nothing more." "You here for revenge?" His voice cracked. "Is that it? Think you're gonna shame me into hanging myself?" Still nothing. "Say it," he whispered. She stood, cleared his plate, washed it like it wasn't his last supper. That night he tore the photo from the wall and burned it in the fireplace. He watched it curl and blacken, then poured another. Drink with shaking hands. The saloon kept quiet now. No more bets. The chalkboard was gone. Word had gotten around. One of the cowboys who laughed at her first started praying before bed. Another sent his money to his mother in Galveston like she'd asked 10 years ago. Nobody said why. That week, a stranger rode into town. Black man, preacher's collar, saddlebag full of books. Said he was called to serve in Dry Creek. Said he'd been writing letters to the old preacher for years. Got no reply. He didn't know the preacher had died. Didn't know his bones had been lying under dust just 5 miles east. The bride brought the cloth scrap to him. The one found in the grave. He recognized it. Held it like glass. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. She didn't speak. Just handed him the warped Bible, too. His hand trembled. "Who gave you this?" She placed one more item in his hand. A ring. Brass. Worn. It had initials carved in from a child's knife. He fell to his knees. The sheriff stood outside the church, watching it all through the window. He smoked 2 cigars that night. Drank enough to forget names. Woke up face down with a page from the war journal pinned to his chest. July 4th, 1864. She didn't leave the house for 2 days. Not because he told her not to, because she didn't need to. He found the old war chest she'd been searching through. Locked, buried under tools. He opened it. Inside were things he hadn't touched in decades. Medals, folded maps, blood-stained letters. And the list, the one they all signed after the Georgia raid. 7 names, 7 hands. 7 men swore to silence. 6 were dead now. Only Eli was left. That night, she sat across the table, candle flickering between them. He didn't ask where she found it, didn't ask how long she'd been planning it. He just said, "So that's what this is." She looked at him, not with hate, not even anger, just pity. "You think I had a choice?" he asked. She slid the list forward, names scratched out, one by one. Only his remained. "You won't speak," he said. "But you want me to." She touched, her throat, then her heart, then the page. He shook his head. "It ain't that easy." Her hand didn't move. He stood up, kicked the chair. "You want confession? Then speak it. Say it out loud." The silence hit him harder than a bullet. She never even blinked. The storm rolled in that night, thunder low, crawling across the ground like something feral. In town, the preacher told the stranger the truth, about the raid, about the men who laughed, about the bride who came in black and never said a word. The new preacher asked, "Why, does she stay?" And Father Keene said, because we need her more than she needed us. At the sheriff's house, Eli stared at his gun, and in the dark her footsteps moved down the hallway, soft, steady, measured like scripture. The wind hit the saloon doors hard enough to make them shudder, and still, no one looked up. Thunder had been crawling across the horizon since sundown, dragging with it the kind of storm that made horses panic and men pray. Inside, the lamps swung on their hooks. The piano man played faster than usual, not because he wanted to, but because silence was starting to itch. The sheriff stood at the bar, whiskey glass in one hand, a folded war journal in the other. He hadn't spoken to anyone since supper. Folks gave him space, the kind of space you give a man holding fire near powder. The bartender just wiped the same clean spot for an hour, head down, pretending not to see how Eli Granger's eyes scanned every corner like someone was watching from the shadows. The bride sat in the back corner, black dress darker than the room, untouched by the flickering lamplight. She hadn't ordered anything, hadn't moved since she entered. She sat like a shadow that had always been there. Most folks avoided that corner now, not because she scared them, but because they weren't sure what part of themselves they'd see if they stared too long. The storm finally reached town, hammering the windows with wind and grit. The piano man switched to something slower, something with no words. A preacher's tune, maybe. Folks shifted in their seats. Nobody laughed. That's when Eli started talking, not to anyone, not out loud, just under his breath, staring into the glass. She followed me. All the way from Georgia, or maybe the grave. I don't even know anymore. He turned around and spotted a saloon girl trying to slip past. 16 maybe, hair tied back, hands full of empty bottles. She didn't look at him. He blocked her path, set the journal on a nearby table. Girl, he said, voice too loud. You think silence makes you holy. She looked up, wide-eyed. He didn't wait. Speak up when a man's talking, or are you planning to end up like her? The bride's eyes lifted. The room quieted. I asked you a question, Eli said again. His hand grabbed the girl's arm, not violent, not yet. Just tight. The bartender moved to say something, then stopped. The girl tried to pull away, and his grip turned to iron. Don't make me teach you how to speak. The bride stood. She didn't shout, didn't raise a hand. She just stood. The piano stopped. Eli turned his head, half a smirk forming. Ah, there she is, the ghost of Elm's Hollow. She walked forward slowly, heels tapping softly on old wood. In her hand was a cloth-wrapped bundle. Rain hit the roof like bullets now, but the only thing louder was the sound of Eli's breath catching. She reached the bar, unwrapped the bundle. She laid a torn Confederate flag down, stained with something dark that hadn't washed out in years, frayed at the edges, threadbare, familiar. Eli didn't move. Then came the second item, a yellowed page, burnt on two corners, unfolded with reverence. Name was circled in dark ink, Eli Granger. Below it a list of others, some with red lines drawn through them, others simply faded. Where'd you get that? His voice cracked. She placed the last object down, a single bullet, scratched with a cross, not carved, scratched, slowly, with intent. You been collecting souvenirs, he said, louder now, trying to pull air into lungs that wouldn't obey. You think you're making something right here? No answer. She's mute, he barked at the room, voice rising into panic. She doesn't speak, you hear me? She looked at him, then at the girl beside him, then at the journal. Eli's hand twitched. The girl broke free and stumbled back. The piano man stood up. The bartender reached under the counter. She raised her hand. Not to strike, not to scold. She opened her palm, pressed it to her own chest, then to her lips. Then she pointed slowly, deliberately, at the cross carved into the bullet. And then she spoke. Only one line, clear as the bell that used to hang from the chapel. Tower. He buried the gospel with my father. but the Lord gave me time to dig it back up." Her voice was soft, but it cut through every man like a blade. Eli stepped back, then forward. He looked like he'd been shot already. "You don't know what that war was like. You don't know what we had to do." The bartender slammed his glass down. The preacher crossed himself. The piano man sat back and stared at the keys like he couldn't remember how to play. She turned from Eli then, not quickly, not triumphantly, just turned, walked to the center of the saloon and sank into a chair like her bones finally remembered how to rest, and she cried. No sound. Just tears, not for herself, for them. The room held still. One man wept without trying to stop. Another whispered something that sounded like a hymn. The girl who'd been grabbed fell to her knees. The sheriff looked around the room, looked at the flag, looked at the bullet. He turned and walked out into the rain. No one followed. Later, folks would swear the storm stopped the second he passed the chapel. Some said they found his boots at the bell tower. Others claimed he rode until he hit the river and let the current take him, but that night not a single man mocked the bride. The bet chalkboard disappeared from the saloon wall. The war journal burned in the stove, and someone carved the date into the bar, July 4th, 1884, the day the silence spoke. No one ever made fun of a quiet woman again. The bell didn't ring the next morning. It just hung there, silent and crooked, rope swinging gently in the breeze like it had tried to cry out during the storm and failed. The sun hit Dry Creek in slow, golden strokes, warming the rooftops before it ever touched the ground, and the town felt quieter than it should have. Not empty, just humbled. Eli Granger was gone. No note, no saddle, no trail. His horse was found tied up outside the church gate, reins looped with a neat sailor's knot like someone didn't plan on needing them again. The chapel doors hung open. Nothing inside was disturbed except the candle at the pulpit, which had burned itself into a puddle of wax. One man swore he saw muddy boot prints leading up to the bell tower ladder. Another swore there were none at all. The sheriff's badge was found under the pulpit, laid gently on top of a black page from the war journal. His name had been scratched out, deep, like someone dug into the paper until it bled through. The preacher didn't make a sermon that Sunday. He just stood at the altar, eyes closed, both hands gripping the sides of the lectern, like he wasn't sure whether to speak or kneel. After a long while, he said, "When the Lord moves quiet, don't mistake it for absence," then stepped down and walked out the door. The townsfolk followed. Some bowed their heads, some just looked at her. She stood at the edge of the pews, black dress still immaculate, not a thread out of place, hands folded like she was praying, but no one believed she needed to anymore. She didn't speak again, didn't nod, didn't cry. She simply turned and walked out behind them. Eli's house went untouched for a week. Then two. Some said burn it down. Others said leave it be. She returned. Once carried nothing out, took nothing in, just swept the porch, set a single candle by the door, lit it, left it burning. At the saloon, the chalkboard that once held bets about her silence had been replaced by a slab of pine. Carved into it were 5 words. Some things speak without sound. The piano man stopped taking requests, played only one song now, a slow, aching hymn no one could name but everyone recognized. He said it came to him in a dream. One man said he saw the bride's hands move during the tune, fingers gliding in the air like she was still speaking through the silence. No one interrupted. A month later, the war chest was found in the desert, half buried under a dead tree, sun-bleached, empty. Only thing inside was a bullet with a cross carved into it and a piece of ribbon, blackened and frayed. The preacher took it to the church and left it at the altar. She came by just once to see it, didn't touch it, didn't stay long. The boy who used to watch her pray started sitting on the church steps with a little notebook. He asked questions, not loudly, just enough for her to hear. Sometimes she'd answer with a look, a gesture. Once she handed him a scrap of paper with just 3 words: "Dig with mercy." Years passed. She never remarried, never left, but the town changed around her. The school took her name unofficially. The Black Bride Schoolhouse, the children called it. No one corrected them. Travelers asked questions. Locals didn't tell the full story. Just said she came with silence and left something else in its place. When the preacher died, she was the only one who stayed behind after the funeral. Sat on the church steps all night. Next morning, someone found her inside, dusting the pews. She cleaned every bench, polished every corner, then knelt by the altar and folded a cloth over the bullet one last time. The town held a vote weeks later, gave her the church keys. No one else wanted them. The girl Eli had once grabbed now taught letters in the same saloon where she'd cried. The piano man lost his hearing but kept playing by memory, and somehow it still sounded like prayer. The boy with the notebook became a preacher himself. His first sermon was simple. A woman came into town once, didn't say a word, and still managed to raise the dead. He didn't mean bodies, he meant men. He meant this place. He meant the ones who walked straighter now, talked softer, held their hats in hand a little longer than they used to. They say if you ride into Dry Creek now and speak too loud in the saloon, the barkeep might just point to the pine slab behind him and ask you to read it. And if you laugh, he'll pour your drink, but he won't speak a word while you're there. Folks who stay longer say she still walks every morning. Black dress faded now, shawl wrapped tight against the wind, feet quiet on the chapel path. Doesn't wave, doesn't scowl, just nods at the world like she remembers it before it tried to forget itself. No one knows how long she'll live. No one asks. One morning, she'll be gone. Maybe the bell will ring that day, maybe not. But everyone agrees, the loudest sound this town ever heard was the day she spoke. Just one line, and 100 men never forgot how it felt to be made small by a whisper.